In the grim darkness of the near future, there is only war. That near future is 2026, and that war is Bandai's war on your wallet. The king of Eastern model kits, Bandai has declared war on the Emperor of the West Games Workshop by entering into the tabletop wargame market with their upcoming line of tiny plastic robots, Gundam Assemble. Even though the full game doesn't release until next year, you can still now get yourself a taste of these tiny palm-sized mecha with the newly released Gundam card game, imaginatively titled, Gundam card game. Really broke their hole with that one, didn't you, Bandai? These boxes right here cost about €29 or dollars each. They include 3 minis and a starter deck of Gundam card game. The starter deck without the minis costs about a tenner, so you're paying pretty much €20 or dollars on the minis, basically $6 or $7 or euro per little dude. The boxes I have right here are in Japanese. I imported mine from Japan, where it cost me about €17 a box from Bai, but it jumped pretty much to $29 a pop after shipping. Worth it or not? Are the minis any good? Well, let's find out. So presenting to you right here, Bandai's frontline attack on Games Workshop. So this is the first of the releases that include Gundam Assemble. Now this is not yet the tabletop game. That is yet to be fully released. There is more details out there. It seems to be a kind of hex-based game, which is a little bit sad. I was hoping it'd be a full terrain tabletop Warhammer 40k-esque sort of shindig, but it doesn't seem like that it is. Anyway, these are the boxes that are released first. These are 4 of the starter sets, the Gundam Assemble starter sets for the new Gundam card game, imaginatively enough called Gundam Card Game. Inside each of these, you do get 3 Gundam Assemble figures, so this is the beginning of what could be a very big new tabletop Gundam revolution, or it's going to be one of those funny things that people look back on in 10 years or 20 years time going, oh, look at this thing Bandai did and failed with. But either way, we get some cards, we get 3 dudes, let's check one out. Or them all, actually them all. Let's check them all out. So here we go, this is the first experience with Gundam Assemble. So as you can see, we've got a nice box right here. Skinnier than I imagined. I guess this is what card game boxes are kind of like. You flip it around to the back here, we've got some images of what we're going to be getting. Now I will mention, this is all in Japanese because I had to get it from Japan. I don't know what the fuck is going on with the stock with this sort of stuff, but pretty much all the pre-orders of the English versions I saw everywhere went in seconds, yet I don't see a single utterance about these little guys anywhere much online at all outside of Japan. Strange. But yeah, like I mentioned, we get some cards inside the box. Seems like we might get a booster. You put these together like a model kit, somewhat like Gunpla, more like Warhammer. These do come in grey, again like Warhammer. And this seems like a this could be you kind of moment when you've got all of your stuff painted. It seems like they are showing some Mr. Hobby colors back here, which is interesting. And here is what it'll be like when you're playing the card game with your 3 figures only. Either way, let's unbox it. Alright, first off, to deal with distracting granddaddy back there. Yeah. You're too distracting. So I'm busting open the box. This is what you get inside of it. So we've got a little bit of a tray containing everything that is in here. That little bit that fell out the back, this is actually your instructions on how to play the game. This, of course, is fully in Japanese right here, but if you get the English version, it will be in English. Flip that on over, and on the other side is kind of like your play field. Basically, where you're going to put your cards when you're going to play the Gundam card game. Now, there is videos out there on how to play the Gundam card game if you are interested. I have actually ordered some English versions of the actual card game, so maybe I'll do some of that in future, but today I'm going to be paying a little bit more attention to the actual model kit guy that's in here, or should I say guys. But when it does come to the deck that is included in here, the starter deck, it's a little bit of a mix of old and new. That is the very first Gundam series, 0079, and one of the most, well, I'd say the most recent full Gundam series, which was the Witch from Mercury. So you do have some mobile suits from that. The main suits getting really super awesome art. Not so main suits getting very nice art. And we do have pilots and a bunch of other stuff in here. That's just a little bit of an outline of that. Very nice cards, by the way, color-coded round back as well, and we've got some tokens for using throughout your play. On top of that, you do get 1 booster. Actually, this feels like 1 card, to be honest, so that's interesting. Me, personally, I've sworn off card games entirely. I hope this doesn't make me relapse, because I did have a very bad Magic the Gathering and Yu-Gi-Oh phase back in the day, and you know, you can only really have a certain amount of super expensive nerd habits, and it's a gym. And especially nerd habits that are very akin to gambling. So, yeah, look at that. That's nice. Must buy more. This right here is basically a foil variant of one that does come inside the deck. I assume that might be the way it works, unless I'm just super unlucky. But I guess it's something that has to match in with what you did get. I guess we'll see when we take a look in the other three. So next up in here is the bag containing what we're really taking a look at today, and that is the models that are included, the Gundam Assemble or the tabletop figures. Now I have to admit, this is making me pretty giddy because if you build Warhammer and you build Gundam, both of which, this is kind of fun because it's like the bastard child of both. These are definitely gunpla runners, but they're laid out in a kind of, or feel like, and look like Warhammer to some degree. So we do get 3 of these in here. This is the first one. It is the Gundam. Now, as for swappable parts, I know, and well, one of the boxes there is actually swappable aspects. That's the strike box. I'll talk about that when we get there. Overall, it looks like the assembly is pretty simple. As far as I can tell, these are push fit, so there does seem to be like little kind of pegs and little raised sections for attaching bits on. So it seems like you may or may not need glue. Looks like may not, but I'd be inclined to use it anyway, you know. If you're moving these around all the time, you don't want them to fall apart. Next up there is the gun cannon, and as you can see, there's not really much choice in regard to any kind of posing. It's going to build like it builds. If you build Warhammer, you probably know that's usually the way Warhammer does. There's sometimes a couple of options in the box, not really in regard to movement, but more so in regard to assembly. However, this is as it is, unless you're going to start cutting and converting. This is the gun tank, by the way. Lastly then, there is the gun cannon. This guy's lying on his belly, so that's why he's got a tactical rock right there, and quite the tactical rock. Hands are attached to it, but overall, once again, this is going to be the kind of one pose build. Next up in here, we have the little base. This is smooth, so it doesn't actually feel like something you would get from Citadel or Games Workshop. This is very soft. Well, smooth, I should say. And as to the size of these right here, they are somewhat comparable to something that you would see by Games Workshop, especially these kind of like mid-sized circle bases. It is, well, ever so slightly next to unnoticeably smaller, but pretty much in essence, kind of the same. There's another model just for the sake of comparison. So the second set that is available is this one right here, which is called Wings of Advance. And as you can see, this one is completely Gundam Wing themed without a Gundam Wing in it. Now that's an interesting move. They went with the Talgis and a pair of Leos. Anyway, once again, there's a wing on the front, which is taunting you, telling you didn't get one in here. And basically around the back, it's the exact same stuff we would have seen before. So the contents of the box right here is exactly the same as the last time, but I did notice this right here, which I didn't see in the first box. It is in there, I just checked. And this is a little bit of an ad for Gunpla and Gundam Assemble. So there is the actual game. So as you can see, it is a hex-based game. So I guess we're going to get some play mats with hexes on them when the full game comes out, apparently in 2026. A little bit of advertisement for Bandai's main model kit line, which of course is Gunpla. If you want to know about that, I've got tons and tons of videos about that. And then around on the other side, we've got a whole load of jargon about team play, I think. Yeah, it seems to be a 4-player version, player 1, 2, 3, and 4. And then on the inside, oh, there's your instructions on how to put things together. So that is important. So what you do need is a nipper. Glue is not required, but usually I would assume it's a good idea. And as for what's in here, explanation and playmat, your starter deck of cards as well as tokens for play. And this box in here is 100% Gundam Wing themed. So Wing Gundam right there, the TV version by the looks of things. We've got your Talgis, Wing Transformed, Heavy Arms, Sandrock, Maganak, Leo, Ares, Toragos, character cards including Hero Yui, Zex Marquis, Troll Barton, Katra, no duo. What? Actually, no death side at all. We got a fucking Maganak. And so on and so forth. Time to lift the lid on the mystery now. See if we just get a shiny version of one of the grunts or something similar like that. Opening it up, it's just the one card yet again. And it's a fancy version of Wing. Kind of like a different fancy version, because this version's already fancy enough. This one's fancy in a different sort of way, kind of zoomed in a little bit, and just a little bit of a different flavor of the same card. Text is the same, in case you're curious. Moving on to the plastic now, once again 3 bases, all the same size. The Talgis in here getting the priority, twice as big a runner or sprue here as what we would have seen on anything inside of these boxes so far, so this one looks nice, big and detailed. And by comparison, the Leos are a little bit simpler. So this one is just a ground type one with a machine gun. And the last one then is a flight type one with the flight backpack and a big old shoulder launcher. On to the next one. So the next one that we have in here is Zeon's Rush. So this one is Zeon themed. So we got Char Zaku, 2 standard Zakus. Up here we've got a Sinanju taunting us that we do not have a Sinanju. Round back, pretty much the exact same thing as we saw before. So speeding on into the meat of what is inside the box because we've seen those pamphlets already. First off in here is the deck. Once again, it is Zeon's Rush, even though that is not a Zeon mobile suit, that is a Neo Zeon mobile suit. That, of course, is the beautiful Sinanju. Kind of sad there isn't a Sinanju in here, but also not sad at the same time, because painting those tiny, tiny little gold details would be quite difficult. And as for what we've got 2 Sinanjus, 2 Chars Zaku, Rosen-Zulu, 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 Rosen-Zulu. We've got a Gyaradoga, again Neo Zeon, a Gazadi, interesting choice. A Dorathy, which is even more interesting a choice, a Zaku 1, Zaku 2, Goof, and then we've got character cards, Full Frontal, Char Aznable, Angelo, and these seem to be maybe some kind of like action cards or something similar to that, and then blah 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 blah. That's what's in there. As for the secret one in here, once again I expect it to be a fancy version of one of the ones we have already, and is it? Indeed it is. Yeah, this format is much nicer. Ooh, dangerous hobby. Dangerous hobby to get into indeed. Okay, so onto the plastic aspect, and of course we've got the bases. Char Zaku, as denoted by the commander horn section right there, again, looking extremely nice. Can't wait to get these together, so let's speed up. There's the standard Zaku the First, armed with a bazooka, and the kneeling Zaku equipped with a heat hawk. The final box right here is Gundam Assemble card game set 4. This one is entitled Seed Strike. So yeah, this is a seed based set. And of course we've got Strike twice in here, funnily enough. That is the Launcher Strike, Sword Strike, and you can actually stick this backpack I've seen online onto the Strike for an Ale Strike. Up here we've got Strike versus Aegis by the looks of things. The back is pretty much the same as before, but with this kit's models. Once again, we've got the exact same contents as the last few stuff, just with, of course, this kit's, or should I say, this particular set's veneer on it. We do have the tokens, the same as before. The cards in here start off with the Ale Strike Gundam, Aegis Gundam, Standard Strike Gundam, the, what's it, Mobius Zero, Mobius, or Mebius, as it says there, Strike Dagger, Aegis Gundam in its mobile armor mode, Jin Mikhail Use version. Characters include Kira Yamato, Run Zala. Then we've got some other cards, Striker Pack, Mula Flaga, Mikeru, Archangel, etc, etc, etc. Here's the bonus pack, and inside of this we have ourselves a version of the Mobius Zero. Again, these particular cards are incredibly nice, the shinies. Yeah, they've definitely managed to make these extremely beautiful cards. So first up in here, we've got the Sword Strike Gundam. So of course it is rocking that giant sword, and it's the Strike Gundam. The second mini in here is the Strike Gundam as well. So this is the Launcher Strike Gundam. So there is the launcher, which makes it the launcher version. So that is pretty cool. And speaking of pretty cool, this might be what makes it the kind of coolest. This right here is the Sky Grasper. So there it is up there. But it does come with the Ale Striker pack, as well as the Ale Striker equipment for using with Strike. So there is an arm for Strike with the beam rifle, as well as a shield, and of course the Ale Striker pack too. So there is some actual options in here, and as far as I know, this probably works with the card game and moving striker packs. That's cool. But yeah, let's get down to what is the most exciting part about these particular boxes, and that is getting these little minis built. Alright, so let's get into a build of one of these little guys right here. So I'm going to start off with the most obvious choice, which of course is the Oryx 78-2 Classic Granddaddy Gundam itself. So it seems we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 parts in total in here, and the vast majority of which being the kind of body. So let's get at it. Now, depending on where you're coming from, whether you're a Gunpla fan, a Warhammer fan, or both, you might be wondering what the kind of plastic is like in here. This is 100% Bandai plastic, so that kind of hard polystyrene. I'm not sure if it's KPS or not, but it is polystyrene, similar to what you would see inside of a Gundam model kit. So it is a little bit on the hard side, not the soft, buttery kind of almost carvable stuff that you see inside of a Games Workshop kit. If you're coming from Warhammer, then it's more similar to the polystyrene releases you sometimes see from Warhammer, aka the Space Marine Heroes and stuff like that, or the stuff that would have came in the various different magazines like Warhammer Imperium. So I have been trying out a couple of nippers while actually building this right here, and just like with gunpla, a god hand definitely does the job very, very cleanly and very, very quickly, as opposed to other standard nippers. This standard nipper also being a god hand, by the way, so of course I do mean the good old reliable SPN 120 is great for it. It is expensive, but anyone should do the job because this is nice and easy to work with plastic, but you will get some little kind of gate marks with a standard nipper as you would, but then again, just file it off. Now, definitely one of the funnest aspects about the fact that this is pretty much Warhammer-esque scale is you can steal parts if you're like, hey, I want me a Gundam-themed storm shield, and I don't want to get into 3D printing and all of that jazz. So, you know, it does kind of lead into some nice plug-and-play conversions, and by plug and play, the plug and play in question is plastic cement. So when it comes to the actually assembly of the Gundam Assembles, this is actually extremely easy. Just cut them out off of the runner the usual kind of way you do with a model kit. The instructions are super simple. You've got numbers denoted on the instructions for the build, and the numbers are on your little runner or sprue right here, and not in a sporadic random ass way like a Warhammer runner, more like an actual Gundam runner where they go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in order. Now there isn't really a whole lot of pieces to this particular kit, so it is easy to put together. You attach the V-fin onto the head into the back of the body into the main body, the front leg then pops on, arm finally followed by the shield. Then we've got the little base for it, it pops on like so, no glue required whatsoever, and this feels like it'll actually hold together incredibly well, and this is what we've got. Even if you are using the best of the best nipper, you are probably going to get these little things around here, the gate marks, so there is a little bit there. If you do want to clean them up, you can snip them just really close, or you can just hit them with a little bit of a file to kind of just get rid of them, or a sanding stick or something similar. Now for me, when it does come to building Warhammer 40k minis, or just Warhammer minis in general, I love it, I absolutely do, but the one thing that absolutely fucks me off with them entirely, whether they're push fit like this guy right here, or the standard glue style ones, is the fact that I feel like you spend less time actually building them than you actually spend scraping off the little mold lines that are all over them. If you leave mold lines on them and paint it, they'll get really obvious and don't look good. Any kind of shades you use will get trapped in them, so you're just spending so long just scraping ad nauseum across the entire surface of your mini until it is done. I find that is really tedious. I'm not sure if it's just this particular Gundam guy right here, the RX-78-2, but this has 0 mold lines. Everything has been smartly put into little various paneling and across various bits. Oh, there's a little bit of a mold line right there, so you'll have to be a little bit careful. There's a split up the body, a little bit of a seam line, but definitely not the same level of mold line dealing with that you have with the Warhammer kit. Now I'm going to paint this here without cleaning any mold lines, and we'll see. Usually they become a little more apparent after finishing, and just as a little bit of a comparison right there with a Space Marine, Bandai knew exactly what they were doing when it was coming to scale. Now this is a little bigger than average kind of guy. There is a more kind of standard size Space Marine, as you can see, so it is in and around the same. This is a little bit on the bigger side. This is kind of, well, standard-ish Intercessor Sergeant. And there's a bit of a smaller one, which is a Scout. So as you can see, they're a little bit smaller on average for the regular old dudes than the Assemble. But yeah, in general, Warhammer models tend to, well, vary greatly in size. And I mean, very greatly in size. So jumping from Federation to Zeon, it's time to build a couple of the Zakus. The build is exactly the same. You cut them out the exact same way, pop them together, well, the exact same way. However, I did notice that the mold lines here are definitely a little bit more prominent than what we would have seen on the very angular Gundam. So a lot of the curves, you will see them. They're not as harsh as you would see on some Warhammer kits, but at the same time, it's not as soft to plastic, but they do clean up really easily. Just a little bit of a scrape of a hobby knife and they will come off with next to no issue. Building these is simple. I didn't even need the instructions. They build up piece by piece very easily out of very big parts. And all I can say is when it comes to the actual Zaku figures here, these little miniatures, these definitely have very Space Marine style appeal. They've got nice rounded aspects, great overall surfaces to paint, and similar in a lot of design aspects, really. Definitely looking a lot easier to maybe paint and kind of detail up than something like the Gundam with all of its various kind of tiny surfaces. These look like they're going to be a real joy to paint. So yeah, continuing on through the batch, going, well, box by box, and we're going to be going with the one that came with the original 0079 Gundam little models inside of it. Now these are extremely simple. The Gundam is a little bit more detailed, but when it comes to the gun cannon and the gun tank, they snap together so easy. Nice large areas, everything works out well. And I will mention that while putting these together, I didn't even use the instructions at all, ever. They really are that simple to put together, and the only one that I had to backtrack a little bit on was the gun tank itself, because the cannons have to go on, well, before you put the two major parts of it together, but everything is so simple, snap perfectly, hold together perfectly once done, and there's lots of detail even though they are easy to put together. As for the gun cannon, it's pretty hilarious because we do have a massive rock in the end that actually goes off the edge of the base, which it makes it, well, take up a whole lot of space compared to the rest, but it does make it unique. That classic gun cannon shooting pose. The second two Zaku's inside of the Zeon box build up pretty much exactly the same as we would have seen with the Char's version. These are nice big pieces. I think out of all of the kits, this one might be my favorite. These three ones right here, like I said, they're very almost Space Marine coded, so they will work very well for that sort of stuff miniature wise. Painting them in Space Marine colors will work. Painting them like Space Marines, following Space Marine tutorials, it will all work out perfectly. Easy to put together, brilliant. When it comes to the Gundam wing box, this one is very interesting because the Tallgeese is the most intricate model out of everything that we've seen. Loads builds up nicely. I will also mention, and kind of sidetracking a little bit here, I was cleaning up the mold lines for the most part while going through this. I stopped doing it while working through them and only going for the kind of very visible ones towards the end because it is a tedious process, definitely. But I'll also mention that when it comes to these models, the barrels at the ends of the guns are not, well, they've got no hole in them. So that does mean you'll have to paint a black circle, or even better yet, drill them. I couldn't find a larger drill bit than the one I have right here. They've gone AWOL on me for some reason. But drilling your barrels always looks better in the long run. Every single thing here does not have a barrel hole. I will mention that. But anyway, once you put together, again, it's very intricate, but it builds up nicely. A lot of the mold lines are hid quite well. And the two Leos are very simple. The flying one, that goes on an actual flying base compared to the rest. It's just a couple of parts, builds up nice and easy. Some mold lines to clean up. And the second Leo is very simple. It's just 3 parts, that's all. A bit of cleanup, but otherwise very nice. Finally then we do have the strike box. And this one has the most, well, I'd say, time-consuming ones to build. The two versions of the strike take quite a long time, mainly because of all the cleanup. They're so detailed and there is a lot of mold lines running all over them. You have to clean them up quite a bit. There is a lot to them, of course, because of the various angles, weaponry, etc. But otherwise, they build up fairly simply enough, I would say. Not too difficult. Finally, then we do have the Sky Grasper. That builds up with an Ale Striker pack. We do have an arm, or should I say a pair of arms for using with the Sword Strike. You can actually pull off the Sword Strike stuff and attach on the Ale Strike stuff. But yeah, this is easy to build up too. Everything snaps together perfect, holding together very nicely out of box. And so far, I'm definitely impressed. Not so much with scraping off mold lines, but with everything else involved. So now going through all of the models one by one, I'll give them the full spin so you can check them out yourself so you can see every angle. First off in here is the first box, and we've got the RX-78 Bandai definitely went all out on this. The detailing is incredible. Now I will mention it does say not to, well, that you don't need to glue them or cement them out of box. I'd recommend cementing to close up the seam lines, but if you don't actually cement them, it means you can take them apart while painting and paint them a little bit in sub-assemblies. For the more intricate ones like the Gundam right here, that might be helpful, because I will say these are incredibly detailed. Zooming right on into stuff like the details, like the face, this looks great and holds up well to paint too, so they've done miniatures perfectly. The second model that comes inside the first box is the gun cannon. So this is leaning over the side of the actual model's base onto a big old tactical rock, looking really cool. This is that classic gun cannon shooting pose. It does mean that you're kind of missing out on the cooler kind of aspects like the front and whatnot. And definitely keeping it unglued from that rock will make it easier to paint. Overall quite nice though. And the last model inside of this box then is the gun tank. A little bit more of a kind of standard pose here, nothing too dramatic or over the top, but I suppose you wouldn't expect too much from the gun tank. So we've all the details you'd want, the cannons on the arms, the vents in the chest, all of the tank looking aspects looking good. There are some mold lines definitely on the caterpillar tracks you may want to clean up, but overall once again, a nice looking model too. Next up in here then is the second box, which is the Zeon one. Now these Zaku models are my favorite of the whole bunch. Starting off with the Shah Zaku one, it's standing in a nice, almost heroic pose, holding its Zaku rifle upwards. A lot of nice detail too. One thing I'm really happy about is the mono eye is recessed, so it's easier to kind of fill this almost like a bowl with liquidy paint than paint something that sticks out. So that is very, very thoughtful on their side. The detail's great, especially underneath the shield on the shoulder, and overall looking awesome. Also included inside this box are two standard Zakus. So first off, we've got this one that's kind of running or rushing forward with its Heat Hawk in hand. This one is extremely, extremely nice. And I will mention, because these are almost Space Marine-esque, it does mean they're very, very easy to paint like Space Marines are. Lots of nice open surfaces, lots of nice recessed panel detailing. It does mean that they really do work well for beginners to start on because it's easy to paint large open spaces. Overall, very, very nice. And the last one in here is a crouching one with a bazooka over its shoulder. Again, very nice pose, very well thought out. The details, again, incredible on this. And when it comes to actually painting something like this, it can be hard to get behind the bazooka. So I do say don't actually cement them right off the bat, and you'll be able to take that off and paint around it. The third box, which is the Gundam Wing box, starts off with the Tallgeese, which is the most detailed model out of them all. Kind of, I guess it kind of ties a little bit with the strike. When it comes to parts, it's definitely got the highest parts count. The detail is incredible. And considering just how small this is, the amount of detail per millimeter they've shoved in here looks fantastic. It's got the Dober gun, its shield, the booster thrusters around back opened up. It is the Tallgeese perfectly. These models are insanely nice. Then we've got the two Leos. We've got the flying one first up in the air on one of those little stands. The stands work out really well. It's just kind of shoved in there, holds well. It's a simple model, but again, something that will be easy to paint. When it comes to the walking one, this is the simplest model out of everything that we're taking a look at today. It's only 3 pieces, and that does mean it has that kind of miniature thing that sometimes you will see where models that don't have a high part count will have funny looking aspects, like this arm right here. It's elongated out because it's not separate to the body really. So this is probably the only really not nice looking aspect in the entirety of this line so far. It's a bit weird looking. Lastly then in here is the Seed Strike box, and I'd say this is the most advanced box out of the lot. First off, we've got the Sword Strike, which has the big old sword as you'd expect. The detail on this model is incredible. There's so much going on, so many different parts, which does mean it is a little harder to clean up. You have to scrape off more mold lines, and painting this will definitely be a lot more difficult because the amount of excessive detail on it. But still, great detail on here definitely. The Launcher Striker is up next, and once again, very, very nice looking. The way it attaches to the base does look a little funny, so you will have to paint that to kind of disguise it. The way the launcher attaches onto the right arm is a little bit awkward too. As you can see, it kind of comes apart very easily. But again, tons and tons of nice detail. You will have to drill the barrel if you want a hole in there. But again, super detailed, and definitely at the higher end of difficulty when it comes to something like painting. And finally then, the third model inside this box, which is the most unique model out of them all, is the Sky Grasper. So this has the Ale Striker pack on the back, and it also comes with the beam rifle and the shield of the Strike Gundam. So these can actually be used to interchange parts with the Sword Strike Gundam. So if you don't want it as the Sword Strike Gundam, you can make it the standard Ale Strike Gundam too, which is cool that you have swapping parts. I assume you can paint them up and still swap them, which is very, very cool little gimmick. But anyway, let's get some of these painted. So you can say a whole lot of things about painting miniatures, but the main one you can say is it takes a long, long time. It is such a time sink. So that does mean I wasn't able to do every single one of them, so I picked a kind of cherry-picked bunch, which is 4 in total. That is the Gundam as well as the 3 Zakus. For me, I always find it really hard to kind of choose color schemes, so I decided I was just going to go with painting 3 of the Zakus in different Space Marine chapters colors. I was also going to use different techniques to kind of dip into some paints I don't normally use, and the Gundam I was going to paint in the standard Gundam colors, and I was just going to, well, roll with it while going through it and see what I came up with. So first up, when it came to Zaku number 1, I decided to go with the classic, really obvious, iconic Warhammer 40,000 color scheme, which of course is the Space Marines chapter known as the Ultramarines. Basically, if you ever look up Space Marine anything or Warhammer 40k anything, this is the color scheme. Also decided to do it the classic style way because that's kind of the way I'm more accustomed to painting Warhammer. Basically, how I went about this was I primed it in blue. That is the McCrag blue spray can. I filled in all the parts that are going to be silver or black with black. Next up, I was going to give it a bit of a wash in order to basically shadow the recessed areas on it. Now, usually what you'd use is something called Nuln oil, but I find they've kind of weakened that in recent years, so I just used a mix of black contrast paint with some contrast medium and globbed it all over the place. And then I painted all the parts on this which were going to be silver, like the piping and the weapons, or should I say weapon. I painted them all in silver, or lead belcher to be precise. Then I gave that all a wash of Nuln Oil and painted in the gold aspects. That's pretty much it for the base of this particular Ultramarines color. Pretty much old school, to the point. So the next chapter I was going to go for is Blood Angels, not quite as recognizable as Ultramarines, but still quite recognizable. Now, I've got a whole bunch of contrast paints by Games Workshop in bright colors, which I never ever use because I never really paint things in bright colors, so I've always wanted to kind of use them. So that's what I was going to do here. So if you don't know what contrast paints are, or speed paints by other brands, basically just blob them, absolutely goo them all over a model just like so. This looks like you've absolutely rendered it into a jelly baby, that you've ruined it, but actually dries down into the recesses and kind of gives you, well, what the name suggests, which is some contrast. Darken the lines, a little lighter towards the body of the actual armor plates. And after that then it's pretty much what I did before. That is using black, this black Templar right here, contrast paint on all the black parts, then lead belcher on anything that's going to be silver. I didn't actually record it, but I also did the gold and some highlights on the armor too. So the third and final chapter I decided to paint was the beautifully yellow Imperial Fists. Now, I've always wanted to paint some Space Marines yellow, but I never wanted to, well, get locked into painting so many little guys yellow. So this was a fun chance to experiment with something I really wanted to try, which, if you don't actually know how it works, can really blow your mind. Well, first off, I primed this in white once again for using those contrast paints, but in order to paint this yellow, believe it or not, I started off by painting it pink. This is actually something that you can do. Now, if you don't understand color theory, or you don't do painting or anything like that in general, this might seem like insanity, but it does actually work. So it's painted absolutely pink first like this, then you actually dry brush white over to bring up the raised areas. So as you can see, what you're getting is a kind of shading. The pink is now only in the recesses and the white is your kind of surface for using clear yellow on. So that's exactly what you do next. You blob this absolutely covered in clear yellow, and the way the actual clear yellow works over pink is you end up with kind of orangey-ish shadows, which is absolutely mind-blowing. And out of all of the styles I chose to paint these guys in, this is the one that I was actually the most blown away by. It works so well, and it is zero effort. Once again, the blacks are painted as they were before. I wanted to bring out some of the panel lines on the Zaku a little bit more, so I did use a couple of different colored shades. In order to pop against the shades, I wanted to add a couple of highlights on it too, so I used some yellow and then some of this Screaming Skull beige color right here to highlight around the edges to give a nice crispy look, and this worked so nicely. So finally then is the Oryx 78-2, and for this right here, you kind of can't take such a kind of, how to say, completely all-encompassing attack like we would have with the other ones by globbing one kind of paint or spraying it all in one color, because it does have different colors all over the place. So basically what I did was I started by spraying it all in a light gray known as Gray Sear. Basically I got this recipe for a white off of Google image search. It's this one right here. And basically, yeah, you just spray it in Gray Sear, give it a wash of Apothecary white contrast paint, which goes into all the recesses almost like a little bit of a panel line, and then you just bring up the highlights using a very light gray followed by white, and it does work really well. It's very clean and very nice, and I can tell you that painting whites is not easy. I've ruined so many models by doing bad white armor. Then it was basically time to paint it and draw the rest of the owl, and I ended up with this. Basically I got so absorbed I just forgot to record it. I did pretty much every color just the standard kind of painting way. I painted it the base color, gave it a little bit of a wash, and then a little bit of a highlight. Simple as. So at this point I really wanted to double down on the fact that these Zakus really do look like Space Marine models. Same general size, same general base style, so I decided to basically base them in the exact same way Games Workshop themselves do for basically on their boxes and on their website. Thankfully there's a website out there called the Heavy Metal Archive. I'll throw a link to it down in the description. This is what it looks like, and it gives you the recipes for painting Warhammer like they are on the boxes, including the bases. You just get sand, glue it to the bases with PVA glue, paint them brown, and lighter brown again. If you've got any rocks attached onto them, for the RX-78-2 I got some cork rocks. They're basically made of bits of cork. You just glue them onto the base, and I painted them that exact color too. These are a grey called Dawnstone. You give them a bit of a wash, and then you dry brush some highlights onto them. Finally then I got some grass tufts, and I know these make absolutely zero sense beside a giant robot. If a robot's 20 meters tall, that means these, what, blades of grass are 2 meters high? Well, I guess maybe in some places. But at this point, it was kind of turned into a little bit of a gag now. At this point, I was looking at them and they looked nice, but there's just something really missing from them. And when it comes to gunpla or even Warhammer miniatures, I always find some decals always finish them off perfectly. Especially if your paint is a little bit on the kind of loose or messy side, throwing some decals on top can make it look a little bit more almost intentional, like you chose a loose graphic style, almost like, I don't know, Clone Wars or Disco Elysium or something like that. The crispy text on top makes it look, even if it isn't, like a stylistic choice. When it comes to the Zaku's, I use the transfers that you get with Space Marine kits, especially in the bigger, larger boxed sets. When it came to the Gundam, I just happened to have some smaller decals lying around, which are for use with high grades and real grades. So the fact that I got an AFF and Gundam stickers small enough to use lying around made me extremely happy. I also finally varnished these onto the surface of the models to give them that kind of painted on look, that they didn't just look like a stuck on transfer, and overall these turned out great. I have to say they are some very fun minis to paint. So finally, there are the 4 models I managed to get around to painting complete. Now this took me a solid 2 days, if not 2.5 days, I think, to actually get these completed. That's how long it can take to paint minis, especially if you're not too experienced with it. There's a lot more I would have liked to do. Some parts are a little bit, well, cut shorter than I would have liked them to be, but you know, in the end, I'm still super happy with the way that they came out. First up there is the Ultramarine Zaku. Now, one thing I will mention about these models is I don't feel like they have as hard an angle on a lot of the different panels and stuff as you would see on something like Warhammer's Warhammer 40k model. So it does mean painting some edges can be a little bit more difficult. Getting straight lines like up on the axe up there, on some parts of the chest, can be a little bit more difficult because you don't have as much to play with and you don't really have as much kind of raised edges for shades and whatnot to catch in. But otherwise still very nice. There's a couple of parts I do need to clean up yet, like the mono eye there I did by mixing some Lamian medium, which is a kind of acrylic medium, with the paint, so it just ran into the eye, but it also means it kind of teardropped out his little face a little bit there, so I need to repaint over that, but I did run out of time. I did edge highlight some aspects, and as you can see, it's easier to edge highlight all of the kind of nice angles in the legs as opposed to the rounded aspects up in the arms, which can be a little bit more difficult, but overall very nice model and fun to paint. Blonde hair, check. Loves red, check. Shah Aznable is 100% a blood angel. Now this right here is the model that I went pretty much ham on the contrast paints. So the red is contrast, the black is contrast. I went in a little bit later with some yellow from the knee pad because I was looking a little bit on the flat side. I wish I'd actually thought of sticking decals on the chests of all of them because that really does give it that little bit of a Space Marines flair. Overall, the red did work out nicely. Again, there isn't as many kind of sharp details for the paint to run into as a Warhammer 40k model, but still it worked out very nicely. I got the mediumed down paint to go into the mono eye a little bit better on this one, and overall, again, very nice. This is an easy pose to paint, an easy pose to detail up, and overall it worked out very nicely. Again, these are very fun little minis. Last up when it comes to the Space Marine Zaku's then is the Imperial Fists Yellow Zaku. And all I can say is this is the one I'm the happiest with the way that it turned out. This was a speed run. This got painted, I would say, in half the time, if not a third of the time as the other ones. There is some issues I would like to clean up a little bit more, like the bazooka there, but otherwise the payoff for this particular technique, the painting it pink, dry brushing it white, and then putting the yellow over it, just the payoff is great. It looks so old school. The nice contrast is kind of soft as opposed to the just using black in all the recesses. It is very nice. I didn't even feel like I need to use as many decals on it because they just way, I don't know, is it the pose? Maybe the dry brushing works a little bit better on these models than just the contrast paints alone. Either way, the combination worked out well. Again, I'd love to go back in, fix a couple of things, but either way, super happy with it. Last up then in here is the Oryx 78-2, which kind of looks like it has the most complex paint job, but it was probably one of the easiest, given how well the white recipe worked out. The blue on the chest was a little bit awkward. The yellow, I just used a contrast yellow, which flowed everywhere I wanted it to and just did what I wanted. It might have been better if I had a contrast blue too, but I didn't. I just used a standard paint. And one thing I will mention right now is somehow the shield fell out of my painting rotation. I threw it onto the model here for this pose, but I didn't realize I still have to fix the whites. I hadn't even any varnish on the shield when the first rotation happened, so in subsequent rotations the varnish is on there drying. So I actually put it to the side while painting and totally forgot about its existence. A nice model to paint, definitely. You can pull off the V-fin and upper head so you can actually get into the eyes quite easily. So keeping this in its sub-assemblies before actually putting it together and painting might be the best idea. Also, I'm so happy I found tiny little decals on it. Overall, looking good. All I can say is if you like painting minis, these are a whole lot of fun. And actually, I've been spending ages talking about what they look like and not really just, well, how big are they? And speaking of which, jumping right on into the size comparison. Now, just in case you're wondering, how big are these in relation to Warhammer, there is a Zaku side by side with a bunch of Primaris Marines. So as you can see, he's a little bit on the bigger side than your average guys, and still a decent bit bigger than bigger Space Marines like Terminators. But I think there's a little bit of extra height on these Gundam circular bases than, say, what you see from Warhammer themselves. And also, just in case you don't give a damn about Space Marines, there it is beside some Xenos, there are some Tyranids, so I'm picking some fairly large ones from the group. And all I can say is if you actually took this model right here and stuck it in with a bunch of Warhammer models somewhere, nobody would really tell the difference. It is so similar in a lot of different ways. Great model too. And finally, how does this tiny little plastic guy compare to other plastic models of the Oryx 78-2? So there's the high-grade Oryx 78-2, the real-grade Oryx 78-2, the master-grade Oryx 78-2, and the perfect-grade Oryx 78-2 Unleashed. So as you can see, this is one small little guy, and it probably only comes up to the knee of a high-grade or a real-grade. So it is very tiny, making it a completely different gunpla experience, because technically it still is gunpla as it is a Gundam plastic model. But yeah, that right there is essentially it. There's nothing more really to say. These are some awesome little models. The card boxes are pretty much worth it for the models alone, but of course if you do grab them in English, you've got a card game too. I am going to be getting some of these in, so if you want to see some videos about the cards, let me know. I highly recommend these models. They are super awesome, especially if you do love Gundam or if you do love minis. And as for how Gundam Assemble will be in 2026, I guess we'll find out then. Anyway, as always, thank you so much for watching. Make sure to come back for more Gunpla and Gundam reviews, and I'll see you next time. It wouldn't be the end of the video without special thanks to each and every single one of you guys for watching my videos, and special thanks to the channel members and the members over on Patreon, including Caleb, Engelhardt, Joe, RG59061, Scotty Thomas, Simon, and Van Fawn.